First, why does religion matter? And why does religion need to be part of the revolution? Okay? This is a very big deal. So we have three eyes. One eye is the eye of the senses. Eye of the senses means the Hubble telescope, fMRIs, my ears, right? Fragrance, touch, right? All the ways, the senses through which we access sensory reality. Okay, that's one way of knowing things. So an fMRI or a Hubble telescope is an expansion of the eye of the senses. Do we got that? Everyone got that? Good. Right, that's the eye of the senses. The second eye is what we might call the eye of the mind. And what's the eye of the mind? So the eye of the mind is mathematics, logic, reason, right? Moral reasoning, right? All of that, from Ramanujan's mathematics to Kant's moral reasoning and his prolegomena on morals, right? All of that is the eye of the mind. Unbelievably important, right? Those are the two eyes. But there's a third eye. And the Islamic mystics call the third eye the eye of the heart. And the great interior scientists in every one of the great traditions had a different name for it, right? The third eye, the eye of the spirit, the hidden eye. Now let's call it the eye of the heart. And the eye of the heart, now stay close, friends. The eye of the heart is what actually gives me literal information about the truth of reality that is not accessible in any other way. And actually, it gives me information about all the truths that make life worth living. Loyalty, love, joy, delight, eros, virtue, kindness, right? Creativity, right? In other words, every virtue without which we literally wouldn't want to be alive. We'd be automatons, right? In a vast data machine, which is where dimensions of society are trying to push us, in which we have to actually rebel against and actually articulate, right, a new vision of a techplex. But that's a different conversation, right? All of those values, right? The knowing that they're real, that love is real, that spirit is real, that we choose, that choice is real, that I have a living felt sense that choice and freedom are real, right? All of those experiences live in the eye of the heart. They live in our first person, and they're accessible through the faculty of perception, which is called the eye of the heart. Now, the eye of the heart allows me to know things that I can't know in any other way. Now, stay close. In the last 200 years, we have developed exponentially, virtually, the technologies of the eye of the senses. So, for example, the Hubble telescope, right? For example, right, advanced mathematics, right, done through supercomputers, which develop complexity theory and chaos theory, right? That's the eye of the mind. But what we've done is we've utterly abandoned the field in terms of the eye of the heart. The inner infinite subjectivity, the subjectivity of the infinite that lives in me, as me, and through me, the eye of the heart, right? My first person knowing and the inner subjective space, the second person knowing that lives between us, that's been left to pop psychology. That's been reduced to a kind of Freudian reductionism. We've actually denuded the human being of her grandeur and called it grandiosity. And we've stopped practicing in the eye of the heart. Wow. And that which was generated by the great traditions, we've lost access to, right? And we look at the great traditions and we say, wow, they were, religions were terrible in the pre-modern period. They were ethnocentric and they were homophobic and, right, those bad religions. Now, is that true? Do religions have enormous shadow? Were they ethnocentric and homophobic? Yes, of course they were, but so were governments. And so was all of reality, right? In others, it wasn't a religion problem. It was a reality problem. It was a structure of consciousness problem, right? And governments and armies and farmers, right, and technicians, right, or whatever the form of technician was, everybody was ethnocentric and homophobic. Reality was, that was the structure of consciousness, and religion expressed that. Now, stay close, okay? Stay close. So the way modernity at its best looked at religion was to say, okay, we're not going to go with, let's say, David Hume and a whole school of thinkers that emerged out of David Hume that essentially rejected and mocked religion. We're not going to go with those people. That's a whole major school of modernity, which actually dominated modernity. But there were other people in modernity, like the perennial philosophers, who said, no, religions were important, but not the rituals, right? Not all of their, local cultural baggage. What the perennialists and a lot of integral thinkers call surface structures, that's not what matters in religion. What matters are the depth structures. And the depth structures are, right, the hidden traditions in every great tradition, which are about realizing that you're one with consciousness, realizing that you're awareness or awareness of awareness. Okay, now go slow with me, okay? I want to say a couple of things, right? One, that's wrong. It's one of the great flaws, right, in that kind of thinking. You see, the rituals of a religion are not just surface structures. The rituals of a religion are the unique self of that religion. And the unique self of that religion is the unique quality of intimacy, the unique quality of meeting between the infinite and the finite that is incarnate in that erotic embrace of the divine, which expresses itself in those intimate caresses and whispers that we call ritual and we call text, right? In the folds of language, right? In the ravishment and rapture of ritual, right? In the gorgeous, right, consciousness in ceremony. And its uniquely intimate quality, which is in some sense culturally untranslatable, right? You can't translate it into universal principles because it's not about universal principles. Yes, there are underlying principles of religions that are universal, that are shared by the religions, and that's important. But that's not what a religion is. That's one dimension of a religion. A religion actually is a unique, intimate, erotic embrace of the divine, right? Who can feel that? Who can feel that? And we can't actually have a conversation with the religions as long as we're looking at them as they're the benighted natives, right? And we are, who are we? Who are we? We're the perennialists, we're the integralists, right? We're the sophisticated postmodernists, right? No. Well, yes, yes, and no. No, we actually have to be able to enter into, right, the intimate space, right, of a unique religion, right, and actually honor that space. And if we can really open ourselves up for the first time in history, we can actually receive or taste something, the fragrance of their intimacy. So do we reject the dimensions of any religion that are ethnocentric? Of course we do. Categorically. Because we basically understand that the word of God, as it appeared in that religion, was refracted through an ethnocentric prism of consciousness. That's a big deal. So I have a deep experience of God, but then that experience of God is refracted through a prism. And that prism is my psychological maturity. And that prism is my structure of consciousness. Stay close. Everyone close? Okay, are we together? Tell me, I'm going to look in the chat box. Are we together here? Who's with us? Who's with us? We're deep in. This is subtle. This is subtle. It's a big deal. So let's give you an example. I'll give you an example. There's a great master named Isaiah in the Hebrew tradition, and another is named Ezekiel in the Hebrew tradition. Both Isaiah and Ezekiel do practices, and they see what's called the Merkavat Adonai, the chariot of God. but they describe the chariot differently. They both are great masters of mysticism, but they describe the chariot differently. Okay, you with me? So then the masters in the 3rd century, the Aramaic masters, they say, what does that mean? Ezekiel and Isaiah, they're both these great masters, these prophetic masters, and they're seeing the chariot of the divine, but they're describing it in substantively different ways. How could that be? So the Aramaic masters, they say, haben kfar, haben krach. This one was a farm boy and this one was a city boy. What does that mean? That means that the master who was a city boy sees the divine chariot, but sees it through his cultural prism, which is he's a city boy. And the farm boy prophet sees it through his farm boy vision. So they both see the chariot differently. They're both seeing the chariot, but actually their prism, their interior prism shows them something different. The same thing's true about my structure stage of moral consciousness. If my structural stage of moral consciousness is ethnocentric, that the border of my love, care, and concern is for me and my people, then I'll have an Islamic idea called Dar el Harb and Dar el Islam, the nation of Islam and the nation of the sword, and the two are pitted against each other. Or I'll have a Christian idea, Augustine, there's only redemption inside of the church. Or I'll have certain strains in Judaism, right, that talk about, right, a chosen people in which a convert can never become as full as a Jew, right? You'll have those strains because the word of the divine is refracted through an ethnocentric structure stage of consciousness. Okay, we got that. So we need to liberate the experience of revelation. Now stay close, friends, stay really close. You can't talk about reality without talking about revelation. We have this narcissistic idea that we are the only actors in the universe. The human being acts, the human being initiates, the human being invokes, which is true. We do initiate, we do invoke, but actually there's a two-sided conversation in reality, right? Reality is a history of revelations. And if you read the history of planet Earth, it's a history of divine revelations. And they're not mythic, they're not made up, right? They're the actual lived experience of the deepest, most subtle and speculative minds, right? Across every period of history, across every cultural space, across every geographical space, there's a cascading series of revelations, right? That's a big deal. So prophecy or revelation is when the divine initiates and the divine invokes. But then in the marriage, in the Eros Gamos, in the meeting between the human being and the divine, where we mutually co-participate in each other, we have to listen, we have to hear, we have to receive the revelation, and the revelation is received through our structure stage of consciousness. That's a big deal. Okay, so let's go slow, let's go deeper, right? It's one mountain, many paths. Does everyone get it? It's one mountain, many paths. One mountain means at the center, at the core, there's the one, right? There's the one love, and there's the one heart, and there's the one unified field of meaning, and there's the universals, right, that bind us all, the narratives of identity, the universe stories. Number one. Number two, there are intimate cascading waves of relationship, right, that emerge out of infinity, that personally address reality. Revelation's real. Revelation's not made up. Yet, number three, revelation is interpreted through your particular structure stage of consciousness, right? So I need to actually receive the revelation, but then I've got to evolve the way I hear it. I've got to listen, right? My listening co-creates the revelation. And if my listening is from an ethnocentric stage of consciousness, then I'm going to hear and interpret. There's going to be a hermeneutic and interpretation to the word of the divine that experiences it as Dar el Harb and Dar el Islam, right? The nation of Islam and the nation of the sword. But if I actually evolve my consciousness, if I evolve my godness, then I'm going to hear that revelation much more clearly. And I'm actually going to feel and realize, right, that actually I am Islam, or I am Judaism, or I am Christianity, or I am Taoism, or I am Buddhism, right? And I have an intimate language. And that language can't be reduced to surface structures. And I have an intimate ritual, and I have an intimate erotic dance with the divine, and I'm loyal to that intimacy. I'm monogamous with that intimacy even. right? This is my intimacy. I'm monogamous with that intimacy, but God is polyamorous. I mean, God's doing it with the Jews. God's doing it with the Christians. God's doing it with a lot of different kinds of Christians and a lot of different kinds of Jews. And God's doing it with the Ashariya in Islam, with the Mu'tazila. Yeah, God's doing it with the Sufis, and God's doing it with all the different sects of Buddhism and all the different sects of Hinduism, right? So God's doing it all over the place. God's polyamorous. God's madly loving, right? Cascading streams of intimate infinity, incarnating, right, in different structures and modes and time. Wow, right? And so, wow, Allahu Akbar, right? Allahu Akbar, of course, we're in Ramadan, right? This unique and gorgeous and stunning and beautiful frame of revelation, right? Which is Islam, right? Which is, wow, we bow. That's what Islam's about. It's hakhna'ah. Islam is the bow, the utter submission. And we've got to actually be able to integrate these intimacies in a new unique self-symphony. And the unique self-symphony is not a kind of benign imperialist reduction of the religions to their universals. That's the major developmental integral mistake. No, the rituals of the religion are not, as the perennialists said, their surface structures. No, the rituals of the religion are their intimate, right, culturally untranslatable, right, ecstatically urgent embraces and incarnations, right, of the erotic dance with the divine. Wow. Right, can you feel that? Allahu Akbar. Right, Allahu Akbar. Right, Allahu Akbar. Right? Allahu Akbar. And you can feel it. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Together around the world. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. But we're going to try and do something new. And we have this very strange idea, right, in modern identity politics, that if we take something from a different religion, we're somehow appropriating it. It has a particular name. Right? We're somehow doing some sort of cultural, right, appropriation. We've got this notion in identity politics, right, that somehow, right, if we take something, we're stealing something from another tradition. Of course, that's not true, right? The greatest, most beautiful, most wondrous, right, developments of every tradition, or when other people received the tradition and developed something in it and honored something in it, right? And so when we can turn to Allah, right? We can turn to Allah, right? And my gentle, humble suggestion to everyone is, if you can, find a great tradition to practice in and participate in the evolution of that great tradition. And at the same time, be a dual citizen, right, of Homo amor, of cosmorotic humanism, of world spirituality, of this great, right, new story that we're telling. We need both. We need a new story. And we need a new story with new languages and, right, and new rituals, right, and new practices, right, and new world spirituality. Right, the underlying vision of the new human and the new humanity, what we call Homo amor, rooted in this vision of the amorous cosmos, right, with an enormous set of distinctions. So we're actually, in some sense, we're creating a new universal great tradition, and not one that obliterates, right, or upends or undoes the great traditions as they are. The great traditions as they are live together. Now, they've got to be updated and evolved. So just like government evolved from the 14th century in much of the world, so religion has to evolve, but within its own internal core, not by becoming kind of a liberal Protestant, liberal Jewish, liberal Islamic, right? No rituals, it all kind of looks the same. No one really believes it anymore. No. to stay passionately committed to the unique self and the unique structure and the unique intimacy, right, of every great tradition, and to evolve the tradition from within its own sources. In other words, each tradition has to go to its own esoteric depth, to its own ethical depth, and within the framework and mechanisms of structures of that great tradition, it evolves. Eternity evolves, always, right? The eternal Tao is the evolving Tao. And of course it does. And that's the responsibility that each great religion has, is to participate in its own evolution of consciousness, but not by becoming a vapid, secularized, tepid version of itself, but by staying. Catholicism should stay in all of its ritual power, right? And here's the last piece. Here's the last piece, okay? And we have to have a world conference of religions in which each one does two things, in which each religion shares its unique instrument, its unique intimate instrument in the unique self symphony, number one. And each religion takes responsibility for the dimensions of the tradition that are actually not evolved. Each tradition takes responsibility for the voices in that tradition that are still ethnocentric and still homophobic. Each religion brings the texts that it's madly proud of and the texts that it's ashamed of, the texts that it has to leave behind. Right? Each religion takes responsibility for its own evolution of consciousness, but not by someone imposing it upon the religion, but by actually the deepest thinkers, figures, prophets, mystics, practitioners within that intimate tradition, evolving it from within. Can you feel that? Wow. Wow. Right? Allahu Akbar. So I can't take responsibility for the internal evolution of Islam. It's not my job. Can't do it. That'd be offensive. But what I can do is, what we can do is since I assume that most of us, right, in this broadcast are not Islamic, or at least not Islamic born, right, I can honor Islam. I can bow with reverence, right? I can use the language, I can access something of the fragrance of the revelation of Allahu Akbar and begin to invite Islam into the unique self symphony. And I can let go of the kind of colonialist dominance which demands, right, the reduction of Islam to abstract universals. No, we're going to create this incredible, unbelievable new world universal great tradition. And part of that great tradition, the great Homo amor tradition, is going to be I'm going to be a dual citizen. I can be fully Allahu Akbar and fully Homo amor. And I can be fully Adonaihu Elohim and fully Allahu Akbar. And I can be fully Atman as Brahman and fully Homo amor, right? And I can be fully, right, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, right, and Homo amor, right? Because actually, the leading edge prophets of each religion at their core are early adopters of Homo amor.